Want to go far in business and in life? You can't do it alone. The secret is expanding your network of personal relationships, building friendships, connecting on an intimate level, away from the office, over a coffee or cocktail. Welcome to All In with the real Nate Payo. The show that asks what happens when you go all in and leverage the power of your network of personal relationships.
From author Donnie Boivin comes the book, How to Be a Success Champion, available on Amazon. After years of living other people's dreams, author Donnie Boivin decided to jump out on his own and start a business, thinking it would be easy. Instead, he had a rude awakening and quickly understood that he had spent 20 years being an employee and had no idea how to be a business owner. His business was tanking, and he was on the brink of losing everything when he decided to fight for business freedom. In this must-read and life-changing book, author Donnie Boivin shares with readers his story intermingled with lessons learned from his mistakes and his failures. In How to Be a Success Champion, you will find advice the author received from mentors and how he went from zero to a six-figure business. The author walks you through the steps of how to get out of your own way, how to play the game of business and win, find your strengths, how to network effectively, how to build a personal brand, how to create champions for your business, how to get great at sales, how to take complete ownership of you and your business. How to Be a Success Champion from author Donnie Boivin, available on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback editions. Order your copy right now. It makes a great book for corporate events too. How to Be a Success Champion from author Donnie Boivin, available on Amazon.
Hello, welcome to the All In podcast with Nate Payo. I am your host, Nate Payo. Today, I am joined with Dr. Philippe Bouissou. Did I get it? Bouissou.
That's perfect.
Always wonder. I have a hard last name too. It's short. It's P-E-O, but Payo. But I always get it too. And I think maybe I feel bad because I always dealt with it. I want to get people's names right too. So, Dr. Bouissou has been in Silicon Valley for 30 years. He's a growth expert, author of a best-selling book called Aligning the Dots. It's a new paradigm to grow any business. He currently manages Blue Dots Partners, which is an advisory firm he recently founded, and it helps businesses grow faster. He's also been the founder and CEO of G2I, Inc., a software company that was acquired by Matra. Senior Vice President of Matra Hachette Multimedia, where he led business development for electronic publishing, $12 billion high-tech and diversified media company before joining Apple as a director of the Worldwide Internet Commerce Group, where he also founded and managed an online Apple store and grew its revenues from $0 to $350 million under Steve Jobs. Wow, you've got quite the resume. And you've been around in the startup world, tech world, big name, Steve Jobs. How'd you get kind of started working around in Silicon Valley and hopping with some of the tech's finest?
Well, I was always very interested in software, and I studied to write software program when I was very young, and then I really was fascinated by Silicon Valley, even though I was in France and in Europe, and I've never been there. But I really, for some reason, it was just like a magnet to me, and so I managed to license a unique software platform from a French company, and I negotiated the exclusive rights for the North American market. And studied the company here, came here, studied the company, and very quickly, our largest customer came to me one day and he says, well, I don't like the fact you sell to my competitors. And I said, look, there is really one way, there's only one way for me to stop, is you buy us and we're not for sale. And that's how we got the company sold.
That's an interesting story. So, I mean, that idea of coming from another country to the United States, you're not familiar with the people, you're not familiar with the players in the industry, you're not familiar with the laws and regulations. How did you think that you could accomplish such a big shift in your life and be successful?
Well, I think it's a combination of two things. One is a pretty high level of naivety. And the second thing is I'm actually a military brat. So I was actually born in Germany just because my dad was stationed over there. And every 2 or 3 years, we would move to a new place. And so, the ability to adapt into new environment wasn't a problem for me. I have done it since I was born. And so to me, the idea of moving to a new country, a new area, and spending, time there was really not an issue. So I wasn't afraid about that.
That's an interesting take, because a lot of people overthink decisions, and they maybe don't want to, get outside their comfort zone, so they play it safe. And other people don't. And it sounds like you included in this is like maybe you just don't even know enough about the risk to realize like what you're really biting off and doing. You just do it. You kind of go, hey, if I'd have known all this, I might not have been.
That's right. That's what I mean by a certain level of naivety. Another good example is that when I was at Apple, I convinced the CEO and the management team that we should sell direct over the internet, which was, back in 95, 96 was a big no-no because Apple was only selling indirect. And the big argument was that we're going to compete against our channel partners, and how are we going to do that? And my argument was always, if somebody wants to buy a Mac from us directly, why can't they? And when I finally got a boss who gave me the budget and the headcount to do it, very quietly, he says, do it in this corner and don't tell anybody within the company. I like the idea, but just be quiet. It's just somewhat hard for me, but we did. And I was so naive. I was thinking, well, we're going to build the back-end e-commerce platform. We're going to do transactions. We're going to take credit cards. We're going to do anti-fraud. We're going to do returns. We're going to ship from our warehouse. And what happened is at the time, Netscape and IBM and Oracle, all the big companies wanted to sell their back-end e-commerce platform to us because they're saying, well, you're Apple. We're going to power your back-end e-commerce platform. It's a complicated problem. You guys don't want to do that. And I had a technical guy on my team who would always ask them questions. So, well, can you do this or can you do that? And the other guy would say, well, we don't have it in this version, but we'll do it for you because you're Apple and it'll be released next quarter. And after a while, this guy worked for me, looked at me and he said, you know what, screw it. We're just going to build it ourselves. and when I look back, I thought that was such a naive things that we did. We had no idea. I didn't even know what a tax table was at the county level or the zip code level. And, but because we're Apple, we say, well, we're Apple, we can build anything we want. And we actually did, but it was a very naive, 30-second decision that had massive consequences on how we would do things. Yeah, that's the right decision, but he was very naive in many ways.
Well, some might say that you had a little bit of luck in your journey to get there, and a little bit of luck in the decisions that you've made. But what would you believe your thoughts are around luck? Are people lucky?
Yeah, I think luck plays a critical role in success. And in fact, if you ask the best or the most well-known successful business people, like Bill Gates would be the first one to admit that luck played a critical role in the success of Microsoft. And so if you ask them, and if they are the right level of humility, they will tell you that they've been extremely lucky to achieve what they have. Now, I actually don't think the right question is, are you lucky or does luck matter? I think the more interesting question is, can you and how do you invite luck? Because you may have a situation of luck around you, but you may not recognize it and take advantage of it. And so it's not so much are you lucky, it's like, if I present a situation that invites luck to you, will you take advantage? Will you recognize that and will you take advantage of it? Now, some of the people have a very strong view that people are born lucky or not. And I don't know if that's true, but I give you an example. Napoleon would never promote a colonel to a general if he could not prove to him that that person was very lucky in the battlefield. And so he would tell the person, when did you win a battle because of luck? And can you prove that to me? And how many times did that happen to you? And it wasn't about luck, about finding the nice woman and becoming the wife. It was a very specific situation in the battlefield where he won, or the person won, because of luck. And, so Napoleon would believe that luck was a critical aspect for being successful in the military. But I don't know if that's true or not. Of course, there's a certain level of luck that I was born in the place I was at the time I was, and I wasn't born in a situation with a poor family and, a difficult educational environment. But I do think that you can recognize and invite it. I think that's possible.
I agree. Your luck plays a hand in a lot of things, but you have to be aware that it's there. You have to be aware to seize the opportunity to be lucky. Maybe winning the lottery is a different story, but you're not going to win it if you're not buying your ticket. But your odds are a lot, very, very slim that you're going to. But there's things you can do. I'm always an advocate of putting yourself in the right places. Like if you have an outcome you want to achieve, you want to hang out in the places where that's more likely to occur. Like if you want to get in shape, hanging out at the hamburger spot is probably not as good of a decision as hanging out at the gym. Like, you might not get in shape at the gym, but you probably going to have better luck at the gym than somewhere else. So I do believe that luck plays a hand in a lot of things, but you have to kind of put yourself, like almost like create your own luck, create your own opportunities. So like when you do kind of find success, people are like, oh, you got lucky. It's like, no, I mean, we did, but at the same time, we worked hard. We put ourselves in positions for opportunities to more likely occur.
Yeah.
So you have a book called Aligning the Dots, which is a new paradigm to grow any business. Can you explain on what the new paradigm is and what is behind your ideas in the book and what inspired you to write it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that any business leader, any entrepreneur, any CEO struggled with a deceptively simple question, which is, what do I do on Monday morning at 8 o'clock to grow my business? And it's a little bit akin to asking the question is, what do I do on Monday morning at 8 o'clock to be a good parent? Everybody wants to be a good parent, but at the same time, there is no real clear answer, or there are thousands of books, which means nobody really knows. And it's a very vexing problem. And I've been on 20 boards, and I noticed that the traditional way to answer that call are just simply ineffective most of the time. So, for example, the first reaction is to look at sales, where we don't have the right sales team, we don't have the right leads, the funnel is bad, we have all kinds of sales issues, the sales compensation is upside down. Then the next step is to look at marketing, where sales will blame marketing because they're going to say, well, we don't have enough leads. The top of the funnel is not there, and we can prosecute enough leads. Therefore, we're not going to reach the kind of revenue that we want. And then you start to blame, product, and you start to offer discounts, and you start to buy other companies thinking they're going to bring additional revenue. You do all kinds of techniques and tactics, but they rarely work. And the key reason is that they are based on emotions rather than data. If you ask the board, it says, why are we offering that discount, or why are we changing the comp structure? The answer is, well, because what we're doing doesn't work, so we're going to do this. But there is no real data analysis on the back end of that decision. So one day I woke up and I said, there's got to be a better way. You can't just do it this way. It just doesn't work. And I came with a big insight a few years ago, which was I realized that the maximum growth rate of a company can only be achieved when that company and the target market are perfectly aligned. I realized that the growth problem was really an alignment problem. And it's like a mechanical watch. If you start to misalign the gears, it will slow down and it will eventually stop ticking. And if you start to misalign your company with your target market, you will not achieve the growth rate potential that you can. So then the next step was to say, well, how do we define that alignment and can we measure it? And the other big insight I found is that there are 4 universal axes of alignment between any business and its target market. And it's really remarkable because it applies to a cafe in Paris, it applies to Tesla, and it applies to any business. And I can tell you very quickly what they are. The first one is that the pain of the customer and the claim that the company is making have to be aligned. So if you come to me, Nate, and you say, well, I have a headache, and I show you a stomachache pill, your pain and my claim are not aligned, you will never buy my pill. The second one is the way the claim is expressed and the way it's understood have to be aligned. So if I describe my pill to you in French, I'm assuming you don't speak French, even though it's the perfect pill for your headache, you will never buy it because you're like, what the heck is this guy talking about?
Mm-hmm.
The third axis is the way people want to acquire the product or the service and the way that product or the service is sold. Those two things have to be aligned. So if I say, Nate, you can get my pill, but you have to fly here in the Bay Area, you're going to say, well, where I live, there's a pharmacy down the street. So why can't I just walk there and buy the pill?
Mm-hmm.
And then the fourth one is my favorite one because I stole it out of the Apple playbook, which is there's one thing I realized working for Steve Jobs is that there is only one single business on this planet. And that unique business is the manufacturing and the delivery of delight. When you buy a product, you have a certain delight expectation in your head. As you consume that product, that delight expectation has to be met. So imagine you swallow my pill for your headache and you develop a rash and your headache is getting worse. Well, clearly that's not what you expected. You're not going to be happy. So if you align the business along the pain and the claim, the message and the perception, the sale and the purchase, and then the expected delight and the delivery, if you perfectly align any business along those four axes, you will grow at the maximum possible rate within that market. And so the book is all about explaining how that works. There's 20 case studies. There's a lot of tools that we've developed that explain how we can measure them. And once you measure those four alignments between 0 and 100%, then you start to understand where the business is misaligned. And that constitutes the base upon which you can start to develop a growth playbook, which is the action plan that you need to have. And once you have that growth playbook, you know what to do on Monday morning at 8 o'clock to grow your business.
So is that just like a report that you, as a CEO, you could create? One of my mentors early on told me, like, hey, when you're running a CEO business, like you can't always be in the weeds of every problem. Like you have to be able to have like something that you look at that gives you indicators of where you might have problems. So he would say, like, if you think of it like triage in a hospital, you go into a hospital, you want to identify what things aren't so you can push it in a direction that it is. So if you walked in and you said, are you bleeding profusely? No. Well, we're not going to send you over there to look and see if you need stitches in your toe. It's, we're going to check your heart. So it's a way of like looking at, okay, what's not operating the way it's supposed to be. That'll give us a general guidance to look into. Is that something that a CEO or even somebody that's just say, hey, I'm not even a CEO, I'm just Nate Peo, personal brand guy that washes cars. Like how could I take this is it like a report? I could learn the system, create this metric that I look at on Monday morning and go, okay, this is how I performed in the past few weeks, and this is where I see we're at, and okay, I'm identifying I'm failing and I'm not at the right metrics and these key areas. How would I use that data to make decisions to implement and move forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. So if you look at it at a quantitative level, CEOs tend to intuitively know along those four axes where they are the most misaligned. Now, they may not, but most of the time they are. The next step is to measure using some of the tools that we've developed. And when they measure, they can start to understand where the misalignments are. So, for example, I can measure your blood pressure, back to your patient example, and I can see your blood pressure is low. So, okay, now it tells me the directions I need to go in order to figure out what's wrong, with you and what do I need to do. So CEOs I would invite all CEOs to measure those four alignments based on the tools and techniques that we've developed. And that will tell them where the most pressing misalignments are, and they can start to focus on developing the action plan. And the action plan comes from the understanding of the measurement. So they know they know where the measurement is too low. And because of the technique we use, they actually know where it's coming from. And that basically tells them what they need to fix and how they need to fix it.
You've made it sound so simple, but it can't be that easy. Or is it that simple of just identifying and reacting?
It's it's simple. It's a very simple yet powerful concept that I've never heard anywhere else. And because people are so much used to looking at the revenue and the pipelines and the prospects and the win-loss analysis, people are just been wearing the wrong lenses for a long time. And if you and it works, if you look at it along those four axes, first of all, it takes the emotion out because you're measuring stuff. So it's not about my opinion or what I think we should be doing. It's about what the data is really telling me. What are the insights I can extract from this data? And so the difficulty is not the concept. The difficulty where we spend a lot of time is how do you actually measure that? What does it mean? How do I measure the alignment between, the pain and the claim? Mm-hmm. How do I put a number behind that? And what does it actually mean? And that was the difficulty of the exercise. And that's what the book really explains in more details, is how do you do it? Because it's one thing to say, you need to do this. Like if I said, well, you need to exercise to lose weight. Okay, well, everybody knows that. The question is, how do you do it? And how do you do it in a way it works?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's about identifying, okay, you know what to do. Okay, now I know to show up. I need to do tasks that take me in this general direction, and evaluate what's working and what's not working, and pivot to things that are working. But you mentioned a part of taking the emotion out, mm-hmm. and in my experience, people that tend to be high performers, in the sense of like CEOs, or people that are top sales people, if sales is a lot of times sales people drive the ship because they ring the bell, mm-hmm. Or people that are entrepreneurial enough that they're going to go start something out. A lot of those people tend to have a lot of emotions. How do you convince them to take a step back from their emotions? And because, instinct got them there, their brash bravado gets them there. And now you're saying, hey, don't just wing it on Monday morning. Like, how do you get somebody convinced to take the emotion out and step back away from it, and not just say they're taking the emotion out, but really get them to get it?
Well, I think the problem, and this is a very Silicon Valley problem. People look at Steve Jobs and they say, well, I want to be like him. And I always say, you can't. There's only one Steve. I've never met anybody even close to Steve Jobs, regardless of what they think or what they say. So if you look at the emotion that maybe a Steve Jobs has or a Bill Gates has, the thing is that they are statistically right. And they are wrong sometimes, but on average, their gut feeling, their instinct is correct. Now, don't ask me why or how they got it, I don't know. But that's okay if you're an exceptional individual like this, an exceptional entrepreneur. Elon Musk would be another good example of that. The problem is that 99.999% of CEOs are not, Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or Bill Gates. And so their emotion, they cannot rely on their emotions, because if they do, it's going to be a disaster. So then the question is, well, what do they do? Well, then they have to look at data and they have to look at the pragmatic approach. I don't think Steve Jobs will ever apply the concept that I developed in my book, because he's going to say, well, I know what I'm doing and I'm just going to do it. But that's fine because he's Steve Jobs. But I tell you, I've worked with hundreds of CEOs and none of them are like Steve Jobs. They need data. They need to understand. They need insights. They need to understand the intricacies of their business, intricacies of the market and how customers buy and all that. And to do that on emotion rarely works. I mean, unless you're, exceptional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tough one to say. And I'm going to guess that the people that are able to leave the emotion behind and implement the concepts are the people that are going to say, hey, this works. And this happens a lot of times with people, is it doesn't work because you didn't give it a chance to work. You didn't, follow the things like going back to the gym, did it work? No, it didn't work. Well, how come? Well, I didn't go, or I didn't go enough. I only went one time and one time was enough. So I think you do have to be willing to, open-minded to say, hey, I want to, clearly, if they're coming to you, they probably have it in their mind already. Like, hey, we can be better. We want to be better. We wouldn't be asking for help. So they come to you and they chose how to do it.
Yeah, I think there's two things I would say. One is every time we start to work with a company and help them grow faster using our approach, we always ask the CEO before we start the work, we said, well, what do you think the problem is and what do you think the solution is? And we do that kind of as a fun exercise, and then we measure, we come back with a growth playbook, and we always compare what we found with what the CEO thought the problem was. And it's very rare that the solution is correct. And it's 50 to 60% true that the problem wasn't even framed correctly. And so it's really hard to do it. The intuition is very hard to be right. And by the way, you can be right at an instant, but the market dynamics the market is changing. Like today's environment is completely different from what it was even 3 or 4 months ago. And therefore you have to readapt. The second thing I would say, it's all about what I call the market and the customer truth. There is a certain way people think, people want to buy, people interpret your message. And if you don't understand what that is, then you're basically playing a statistical games where the odds are against you. And yeah, you can play that game, and yes, you can be lucky. And by the way, Steve Jobs was brilliant, and I worked closely with him. Studied Next, and Next was a disaster. The company didn't go anywhere, so he wasn't always right. But I think that if you don't try to understand that truth, it's very hard. And then the other thing is we bring objectivity. It's like, if you try to help parenting that are struggling with their baby not sleeping at night because they are themselves sleep deprived, they don't look at the world the same way that somebody else would. And the CEOs we work with are really immersed in their company, in their business, it's their baby, in the DNA. We come with completely fresh eyes where we don't have any axe to grind, we don't have any history, we don't really care, and because we measure. And I think that objectivity is a huge advantage that we can bring to the table.
That's a great way to look at it. So that kind of leads me to my next question regarding this idea of being all in on an idea or an outcome. What does that mean to you?
I think that means is to be authentic in pursuing and implementing your idea or your dream or your passion, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is, and doing it for the right reason. So you talked a little bit earlier about making investment as an angel, figuring out, the winners and the losers. I've looked at 2,600 companies. I think I invested in 14 or 15 in my VC life. And I made mistakes. In fact, most of them were mistakes, but the winners way out, performed compared to the losers. And we're doing seed and early stage investing. So I'm not talking about mid stage or late stage investing. I'm not talking about private equity or growth equity types of funds. And what I learned is that one of the biggest indicator of success is to understand the why and the motivation of the entrepreneur for doing what he's doing. I think that starting a company at any time is a crazy enterprise. I think people don't realize how hard it is. There's nothing glamorous about it. It's tedious. It's roller coaster. I was on the phone this morning with the CEO who just signed a term sheet today for a $20 million Series B round. And he was on the high, and even 3 months ago, we thought we could never raise any money. And he was on the low. And I was telling him, I said, look, you're on a high today, but next week you'll be on the low again. And I just don't know when it's coming. And it's like literally like a roller coaster where you have blinders. You don't even see anything. And so I think that the winners, you have to believe in it. You have to have the right motivation to do it. If it's to make money, it doesn't work. If it's for ego reason, it rarely works. You really have to understand, why is the entrepreneur or the founding team, why are they doing this really? And once you understand that, I think it will tell you whether they have a higher chance of success or not.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. You talk about the highs and the lows, and it's not easy to predict. But I mean, have you ever had where a company's came to you and, hey, we run them through the Blue Dot program, and you just look at it and you go, I don't know how you guys are even alive. Like, this looks like the worst, I'm exaggerating. Like, it's just like, hey, you're completely misaligned. And I don't know how you could get it aligned. Like, it just, without a major shift, you're not going to get aligned.
Yeah. So I always tell people when they ask me, what do you do? I say, I'm a doctor. And I'm not saying that because of my PhD in physics. I'm saying that, and I'm not saying that because I'm a physician. I'm not. And they say, what do you mean? I said, well, my job is to get vital signs, the pulse, the oxygen level, and all that, through some machines that we've developed at Blue Dots. And based on that, my job is to give a prescription to the person. So I tell them what pill to take, when, how many times, for how long. Whether they do it or not is their problem. So I'm not in the business of convincing somebody to take the pill. I'm in the business of doing the best diagnostic based on our tools, and then tell them, here's what you should be doing. Now, like a doctor, sometimes we have clients where there's no there. They say, I want to be this, I want to grow that way, and I want to reach that potential, market size, share. And we look at it and we shake our heads and we say, you can't. There's no way. So it's a bit like a doctor when the doctor has to tell the patient, hey, I found some bad stuff. You have, stage 3 cancer, and this is not what you expected. But we are always in the business of being truthful and telling them if they have cancer, if the company has cancer, if the company can go, if there's no there, we'll tell them. And a few years ago, we had a very large, $1 billion company in Switzerland that hired us, and we did like a 3-month project using our methodology. And we flew to Zurich. My partner John and I flew to Zurich, and we did a presentation to the board. There were maybe 14, 15 people, and we told them there was no there. And at the end, the CEO looked at me and he says, "I can't tell if I love you or I hate you." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he says, "Well, I hate you because you're telling me we have cancer. There's no there. But I love you because I have to say that the process by which you came to that decision, I can't argue. It was very well done, and there's nothing we can do about that." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "You're reacting like a patient who just learned that he has cancer, and that's tough."
Mm-hmm. Do people, did they find a way out, or did they end up having to?
Well, they either, embrace, which is the easiest path. They embrace the status quo. They don't do anything. They just go back to what they were doing. Or they decided to take a serious look and to do a pivot and a change, and a pretty radical change. It's like when you announce somebody has cancer, you have several possible reactions. One is, I'm going to die anyway, and I'm not going to do anything. Or, what is it? I'm going to read every single book on the topic, and I'm going to learn a lot, and I'm going to try to talk to the best people, and I'm going to try to fight this thing. So it's a bit similar. It depends on the CEO and the management team. Yeah.
So that kind of leads me to my next question is the types of businesses and entrepreneurs or CEOs that you like to work with. I mean, I'm sure that the book is for more than the people that would use your services as a consultant, but who, if you're going to describe the avatar of the person reading your book, who are they?
I think it's anybody who is concerned about growing a business. So, like if you're a dentist, let's say, and you have a number of customers that come every year, but you can't really grow because you're already taking, 30 patients a day or whatever. Mm-hmm. You're not going to wake up in the morning saying, well, I need to grow. And you're just going to maintain your predictability of cash flow. That's the business you're in. So those are one types of business. The other type is the business where the company has raised money. They want to grow because they have investors, and the investors would never have invested if they knew the company would never grow. And in fact, I would argue that the best way to create sustainable shareholder value is to have a business that grows faster than the market in which the business operates. You have to be the market. So any C-level executive, any board member, any investors, any entrepreneur, any CEO who is asking himself or herself, what can I do to grow, should read the book and should, in my opinion, use the methodology and implement it.
Great.
If you're not concerned about growth, then that's fine. Then you're doing good. There's nothing wrong with that. By the way, the economy of this country is driven by many, many businesses that have no aspiration to grow, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do get caught up in like grow, and at some point your business reaches its capacity. Like as a dentist, your first day out of dental school, I got to get my
Grow.
first client. I need to
Right.
grow, and then you cap out of what you can do, and
That's right.
and that's okay. But you might also say, you know what, maybe I want to have 5 dentists as part of my practice, and I want to grow that. So there's ways that you can be in a business that's of growth and not of
Yeah,
growth.
that's exactly right. And maybe you
Very
want to build a franchise of dentists all over the world. I mean, and so you're right. There are businesses. It really depends on what where does the CEO want to take the business.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you run it through the model and you find out you're aligned for extreme growth, and it's hey, I need to make this available. I need to serve more people and offer it to it.
Yeah.
So I think.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I have one more point I want to make because
for sure.
that really bugs me. There is this issue in Silicon Valley. It's a very Silicon Valley attitude that says you grow at any price. You raise $200 million. You grow as fast as you can. And I think that while there are some very specific cases where that model makes sense. So if you take an Uber versus Lyft, that makes sense, where you have a winner-take-all kind of a market dynamic. But I actually think that growing for the sake of growth is wrong. You have to do it in a way, because if you grow too fast, you can destroy your business. I have these case studies of Crate and Barrel, who Gordon Siegel, the CEO, was explaining that he sold the company to a private equity firm. They wanted to grow the business too fast, and they actually revenue went down for the first time ever in the history of Crate and Barrel. And so they brought him back, and then he started to say, okay, we can grow, but you have to do it in a very measurable way. So I have a section in the book that says that growing is like drinking. It needs to be done responsibly. And I think that's very true. So I would say growing is fine, but it's like in what context, in what market, for what reason, and how do you do it? And it's to the detriment of what if you were to grow fast? And there's always a trade-off to be made, and you have to understand that. I think it's critical.
Yeah, that is a very excellent point to make. Very, very important, because I was thinking about a time. This is a bunch of years back, and I had a landscape business, and I wanted to grow it big, and I worked with this guy that did concrete for me, and he said, you either got to be really, really small or really, really big, because if you're in between, it's a mess. And he was right, because like if you're kind of small, you can be very successful in this like small playing field, and but then when you try to go to the next level, all of a sudden to scale up, you just eat into all your profits, all your margin, all your resources, and then you're doing more for less, and you're putting in way more effort, and you're just spinning your wheels. And to get to that level, that huge level you need to be at, to like all of a sudden have enough income coming in to support the infrastructure you have, it's a hard place to get to. So definitely super important.
Yeah, very true.
Man, I've enjoyed this conversation immensely. I think you got a ton of great stories and great insight. You probably got some old war stories from the Silicon Valley days, especially if it was in the 90s. Where can somebody connect with you if they want to pick up your book, or also
so they can connect on LinkedIn. If they want to get some more information about the book, they can go to aligningthedots.com. So which is the title of the book. They can go to philippebouissou.com as well, but it's a lot easier to remember, aligningthedots.com. And the book is on Amazon. They can easily get it and get more information about it. And awesome. They can go to bluedotspartners.com as well. But all that is linked from my website and from aligningthedots.com.
Very cool. We'll have all those links in the show notes. I encourage you to get the book, read it, check it out. I definitely think just the way you're describing it can help somebody from a small business owner to somebody CEO, to a founder, to a new tech person, to somebody that's been in it for a while. I think you're going to find a ton of value in it, no matter where you're at in the business cycle. So awesome. Thank you for coming on and chatting.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Nate. I really enjoyed it, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Make sure to visit our website, therealnatepeo.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, so you'll never miss an episode of All In. While you're at it, if you found value, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if simply tell 2 friends about the show. Looking to connect? You can find Nate Peo on LinkedIn or Instagram